Okay,
So
awesome.
let you take it from here.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming in. My name's Robin Murphy. And as you may have just heard, I'm recent to Portland. Originally from the Midwest, grew up in Kansas City and did my whole adult life there, raising my family and working there in Kansas City, and then moved out here to Portland to be with my daughter, one of my daughters, and my grandchildren. So I'm really, really loving it out here. And I'm really grateful to Steve and Dark Star Magick for letting me come in and share a little bit of what I have gleaned from being a practicing witch for over 30 years. I started in 1990s officially, actual study. There certainly were indications and forays before that that my spiritual leanings were not mainstream. But then I began official study in 1990, and since then became a high priestess in my community. And I ran the ritual committee for the Heartland Pagan Festival, and I was on staff at Diana's Scrub Mystery School, Cherry Hill Seminary, briefly with Pagan Spirit Gathering, and I've done workshops and conferences, and festivals, and conventions for the last couple decades all over the country and a couple times out of the country. So I'm really happy to be settling up here and starting to connect and create community here as well, and share just some of the things I have gathered from doing witchcraft for over 30 years. So that tells you a little bit about me, and I was hoping you would tell me a little bit about you. What your name is and what drew you here tonight to this practice. And hello to our online folk. I'm glad that you are here with us and wish that you could share, but we're
Well, if you'd like to share online, you can write something in the comment section and I will share it with the class.
There you go. All right. So do you mind starting?
No, not at all. My name is I'm aware this was a Muertos. It's that kind of hair where I always ask my father, can I please get some photographs of my grandkids? And that still hasn't happened yet. Right again today, right again just recently. There we'll see. And so absent of photographs of my more recent dad in my family, I'd like to learn a little more about what else can I use without, Sam's photographs. Because I've always heard photographs of your ancestors, they just don't happen.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. We will cover that for sure.
Good question.
Okay, good. Good. Don't let me forget to make sure it's answered.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
I'm Jessica. I'm just here as a general interest, and it's the time of year when a lot of these discussions come up, when a lot of around the world celebrations of ancestry, traditions honoring them kind of pop up. So I'm very interested in that.
Awesome. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Robin.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Sorry, I didn't mean to barge in.
Oh, no, it's perfectly all right. We were just getting started. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us what brought you here?
Yeah, my name's Elizabeth, and not to bite what you said, but basically the same reason, which is very interesting.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
My name's Colin, and it's kind of hard to say exactly why I chose this specific thing, but it's, there's something about being in connection with my ancestors that seems important at this time. I don't feel connected in general. I don't. Well, it's kind of weird. Like I feel connected in the negative sense, but not in the positive sense. So it's like I'm coming for like the resource and the and to learn more about culturally how this fits in, because obviously don't have a great space for this in our culture today.
Right.
So part of what I'm doing here on live is like participating in this and seeing how this can go outside of a small room of 6 people, you know.
I'm so glad you brought up really, really good points, Colin, things that we're going to talk about. And if you guys don't have any questions, I'll just go ahead and dive in. We good? All right.
Online,
Yes.
my business partner, Uta, she says, the older I get, the more people I lose and the more interested I am in honoring their memory and feeling connected to them still. I do some basic things, but I want to know more.
Awesome. Thank you, Uda. We're going to touch on that too. Definitely, I feel that. There's lots of reasons to be here, and there's lots of reasons to honor our ancestors. I think Colin brings up really the kernel of why I wanted to even, facilitate a conversation about this, teach a course, whatever, teach a class. And you all have kind of mentioned or indicated that you're aware that there's cultural traditions, but that there's more talk about ancestors and ancestor veneration and healing generational trauma, and a lot of that in kind of the zeitgeist right now, in the cultural chat, if you will. And I think you hit on it, and that's the biggest thing is in Western society, we do not have a lot of connection, right? The nuclear family, what shifted during, the late 50s and 60s, and the idea of the, one family, one house kind of thing, and how consumerism may have had a hand in that. But we're certainly less connected with our families, right? Our kids are supposed to move out, and the different generations are supposed to, certainly in white culture, live on their own. And we don't have a lot of knowledge sometimes about who has come before. And so I think one of the reasons that people are leaning into this now is because we're really sensing strongly the lack of connection and the desire for it. And how do we do it when we don't have some of the pieces, when our society doesn't necessarily set us up for success with our practices, in ancestor acknowledgement. So good segue right there. Certainly, this was illustrated today when I was on TikTok, and this woman was so enthusiastic and very, very earnest about the fact that she just realized that maybe, Halloween, people are so into Halloween because it might make people more comfortable understanding death. And like, this was a new concept. And I was like, oh, honey. Oh, honey. And good for her for being so enthusiastic and kind of, having a light bulb. And it's like, you are going to be so happy to learn that people have been doing this for several thousands of years. And yes, you are absolutely right. Halloween does have something to do with death. And, she brought up some sweet points about the fact that we may be more attuned or eager or hungry for information about changing our relationships with the dead and dying because post-COVID. And I think, I think that's actually a very good point. And I think you could very well be right. It's a theory that makes sense to me. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and about some of the cultural traditions of this time of the year. As you said, this is the time. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do some celebration rituals as well. We're going to be talking about our ancestors and our lineage. And what do you do when you don't know your ancestors? What do you do when your ancestors maybe were not healthy, mentally or physically, and there was disconnect in the family line. Some of that generational trauma healing in there as well. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is becoming good ancestors and the inevitability of our own deaths and those of everything and everyone we love. And instead of that being absolutely horrible, how can we shift that paradigm a little bit to realize it's a natural cycle, that grief is a natural part of life that we can live with, and that we have a responsibility to whoever is left behind when we cross over. How do we set them up for success as we pass? So how do we be good ancestors? So those are going to be the big topics we're going to talk about today. And I wanted to jump right in and talk about actual Halloween, which of course you may know is derived from the Celtic festival Samhain. And you may have seen, I don't know what your level of knowledge is here, so I'm going to be kind of rudimentary. You may have seen it spelled, and it's spelled Samhain. It looks like you would pronounce it Samhain. Okay, and there are a few people who mispronounce it Samhain. Okay, it is an Irish tradition, Irish Celtic, Irish and Scottish roots at the base of it, and in Irish, in Gaelic, or in Gaelic, it is pronounced Samhain. So Samhain, for those of you who may not know that, Samhain. So, yes, in America, Halloween has, become, kind of a cultural and, again, family tradition of celebrating the scary stuff, of, the kids dressing up, and all of that has roots in the original Celtic holiday of Samhain. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So some of you may know some of these things, and some of you may not. So the roots of it are really not known, but some of the traditions are very known. For example, it is still practiced far more religiously in Ireland and Scotland right now, and far more culturally than how Halloween is practiced here in America. Some of the traditions like the jack-o'-lantern, okay, that is an old tradition because really Samhain represented the end of the last harvest, right? Of the Celtic wheel of the year, of the agricultural, way that the seasons played out in that part of the world is you were coming to the end of harvest. Okay, so the last things that were ripening, like apples and like pumpkins and on the gourd family stuff, this was the last stuff that you were picking out of the fields and off the trees and so on and so forth. So this is the last harvest. So those things like apples and pumpkins are, iconography really of Halloween. They've been brought over. They were originally representations of, the bounty, of that last harvest. Because we're, of course, beginning the dark season of the year, at least in, that Indo-European area of the world, in the Northern Hemisphere. We're going to be going into what at that time was the potential for death, right? A deeper, more potential and possibility for death. The animals might not make it through winter. Your old folks may not make it through winter. The babies may not make it through winter because you didn't know what the weather was going to do. You didn't know what, illness would happen when you're talking these agricultural, ancient societies. So they were aware that it was time to celebrate. This was the last big celebration, the last big harvest, put things away, much like the squirrels hoard those nuts. And so also one of the things that they did was they wanted to ward off any evil spirits. So the jack-o'-lantern was carved, and the gourds or the squashes were carved to scare away. That's why the faces are scary, to scare away the evil spirits that might come and make people sick or make the livestock sick or, curse the village kinds of things. So some of these traditions come from that deep-seated knowledge that we didn't know what was going to happen over the winter. And so we were going to do everything within our power to prepare for that against all things seen and unseen. So that's a little bit about, how some of those traditions began. One of the big traditions still in Ireland and Scotland, and on my bucket list is to go, is the big fire festivals. Because this is a particular, high holiday, if you will, on the Celtic wheel of the year, there are huge fire celebrations. Particularly, like there's a huge one in Edinburgh, Scotland, and there's several in Ireland as well. And the tradition is the bonfire, right? This is where the village, the people will come together, one big huge bonfire, to celebrate again the harvest, to acknowledge that this light is going to be what gets us through this dark time, the winter time. And there is, in some counties in the Ireland and Scotland and the Celtic nations, where the old tradition is you put out your hearth fire, and you would only relight your fire from the village bonfire, the Samhain bonfire. And it's become known as the Celtic New Year. In witchcraft traditions, those that practice, some of the actual traditions, this is considered the Celtic New Year. Another, death and rebirth, ending and beginning kind of cycle scenario situation. So, representative of that is you would light your hearth fire again to start the new year from the bonfire. I actually have some pictures I'm going to show you guys here in a bit, and a few of the pictures are from this big Celtic fire festival. And in Edinburgh, they will have hundreds of thousands of people go up to Captain Hill and observe this huge bonfire. And same thing over in Ireland as well. So they have a big bonfire at Samhain and a big bonfire at Beltane or Beltane, depending on if you're Scots or Irish, which is directly across in May, directly across the wheel. So big bonfires, a lot of people will do, some of their celebration rituals around a fire. Candle magic is big at this time of the year. Again, because that fire is going to be what gets us through the winter. So that's a little bit about kind of the Celtic traditions. One of the things that's kind of ancestor related is because it was the end, considered the new year, the end of the year, you would speak into the fire the names of those who had passed that last year. So anybody who had passed away, you celebrated their name. And one of the traditions that I've been a part of is you say the name of your loved one who has passed, and then the rest of the circle, the tribe, or the village, clan says their name back. So it's this wonderful, offering into the fire. It's releasing. We're going to be talking about quite a bit of releasing magic. Happens at this time of the year as well. And then the honoring of everybody in the clan, speaking their name. In some traditions, like the Maori tradition, in New Zealand and the Australian indigenous folks, you do not speak the name of the dead. I don't know if any of you know that. It was new information to me when I saw Baz Luhrmann's Australia. And they were talking about some of the traditions of the Maori people, and that is one of them, that you don't speak the name of your dead. So different cultures have a lot of different traditions, but we're going to talk about, we talked about the big Celtic one because it is probably the most, it is one of the most obvious celebrations, cultural celebrations of this time. And it is what kind of birthed our American Halloween. So do you guys have any questions about that? Was that?
Is there any particular type of wood that they would use for the bonfires? Was there like a specific one?
That's a really good question. I don't know specifically if there was a specific one, or if they had or if they were just trying to, again, get rid of the dead brush and the things from the harvest and kind of releasing all that kind of thing. I was reading one description where they would toss the bones of deceased animals into the fire as well. So to my knowledge, I don't know if there was a specific kind. If if the Druids themselves had like a sacred sound fire, they probably did. But your regular village fire was probably what was handy and what needed to be released. So that would be my semi-educated guess. Obviously, the next culture who celebrates this time of the year is the Latin culture and Dios de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And that certainly has shown up in America and all over the world as really, in my mind, such a beautiful representation of how death can be celebrated and how this time of the year is the time to do that. And the history says that Dia de los Muertos is this kind of celebration has been around for like 3,000 years. And it was originally, interestingly enough, in the summer. And when the Spanish came over to colonize, they moved it to what had already been created, the All Souls Day, All Saints Day, All Hallows Eve, that the church had created in the 8th century. So you have the Celtic, pagan here in the Indo-European, and the church, the Catholic Church has come up and taken the pagan holidays so that they can integrate the people into the Christian faith. And so they took the Samhain holidays and made it All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, All Souls Day. And then the same group of folk, the same church came over to South America, to the Latin peoples, and did the same thing. Moved their death celebration, their ancestor celebration, to the same time as what would have been the original Celtic indigenous holiday, so that the church could kind of usurp both of those cultures. Yay. History, it's history. No matter where it is in the calendar, what calendar it is a glorious, glorious example of how to celebrate our ancestors. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the traditions and some of the things that you guys may be aware of. It happens over the same time, October 31st, November 1st, November 2nd. Basically, in all cultures, whether it's the All Hallows Eve, whether it's Samhain, whether it's Day of the Dead, it's kind of a 3-day arc holiday. So all of them, consider those 3 days to be part of the celebration. The Day of the Dead is not just a day. Dia de los Muertos is 2 days long, traditionally November 1st and November 2nd. You've seen the sugar skulls as part of that. They're honoring La Katrina, she is the spirit and essence of this holiday. You'll see marigolds, lots and lots of the bright yellow, bright orange, bright red marigolds. It was thought to be indigenously Aztec originally, and it is not my heritage, so I hope I'm speaking correctly about the knowledge that I have gleaned about this. Part of the traditions is to make the ofrendas, which is the ancestor altar, okay, and to leave food, to leave wine, to go to the graves of your loved ones, and to eat and drink on the grave with your loved ones, to speak their name. You clean up the graves, you clean the gravestones. So it's a celebration, and in both the Celtic culture and the Latin culture, this is about a belief that your loved ones are still with you. They still can communicate to you, and you can communicate to them, and that death is a natural part and cycle of life, and that time over there has no meanings, and you'll be with them soon. So it's in my humble opinion, a really healthy way of looking at the natural transition from living to dead. And that it's a great way to handle grief, because while death may be natural, grief still happens, and grief is still really hard. And in honoring these rituals and in honoring the ancestors, there is a relationship that happens that lets grief have somewhere to go, if that makes sense. It lets grief have somewhere to go. When we ritualize it and celebrate it, we're taking some of the fear out of it. And certainly in American culture, there's a lot of fear around death. We avoid it at all costs. The medical community will, again, avoid it at all costs, at a lot of costs, and unnecessarily so. So many times, I know stories, whether in your own family or elsewhere, where folks just should have had the grace and dignity to be able to pass on their own, and we're not allowed that. We know here in California, is it Oregon, where people can choose if it's medically necessary?
We actually had to pass that 3 times with a popular vote, because 2 times the people who lost the election held it up in courts and muddled it. So yeah, the people in Oregon it is now the law,
Right.
but it took passing a popular vote 3 different times.
Right.
Together.
So I think with and this is just my opinion, but I think as we continue as a Western culture to look into like mental health, that death will be one of the things that we grapple with. Nowadays, you may be aware, death doulas. If you're familiar with the term doula, for childbirth, somebody who helps that child come into the world, a death doula will help somebody leave the world. And while hospice is doing kind of medical things, the death doula is taking care of the family and the person passing if they're having a not sudden passing. So it is definitely coming into more of a cultural mainstream to have conversations and to shift the paradigm a little bit about it. So again, this celebration, the Dias de los Muertos celebration is just such a wonderful example of the celebrating the joy your loved ones have by, or just honoring and respecting their lives, whether you knew them or not, just the things that they went through, the trials and tribulations and joys and celebrations that they have. So very colorful, lots of parades. Both of these cultures are big on parades. what we would call parades, processions at this time of the year. And so, yes, if either of these cultures intrigue you, by all means, now's the time to read more and to find more. And I'm sure in the next 2 weeks, there are going to be lots of celebrations around the city, both from both cultural perspectives of both the Celtic and in the Latin. So, and again, the good Catholics will be going and honoring their ancestors for All Saints Day and, All Hallows Eve and that All Souls Day. That kind of 3-day period as well in honoring those who are passed. So, those are kind of the big 3 cultural traditions and the ones that we see, just even in our just society passing by. So those are the influences of this time of the year. Do you guys have any questions about any of that? That was just like tip of the iceberg. Good, yeah.
So I mean, there's like celebration and gratitude, and what about for those who passed who like who aren't resting or like the unresolved?
Yes.
Is that part of
There is that. Yes. As a matter of fact, we're going to get to that because that's a huge part. What do you do with ancestors who, again, who maybe didn't live good human lives and are struggling? So, but in kind of finishing this up a little bit, there's some things that are similar across cultures in this, and that's fire, candles. Candles are great big in all the lineages that we've talked about here, the big 3. Food, bringing people food, celebrating, eating, drink, pouring out drinks on graves. There's a lot of celebration with food and drink and flowers. So those are the big 4: candles or fire, food, drink, and flowers are part of this year's celebration, this turn of the wheel in all these cultural ways of doing it. So I want to talk about how some actual traditions we can do, and then we're going to get into the meaty stuff. So if you wanted to celebrate on your own, so here's the cultural overview, right? So we've talked about the big culture. Now, what can you do as an individual? The number one thing that people will tell you, and I will tell you, is create an altar. All right, and that can be anything big and extravagant and beautiful, like the one behind you. It can be a teeny tiny one. It can be super subtle on your desk at work or, on your windowsill at home kind of thing. How do you do that? Well, obviously, yes, pictures would be ideal, but that's not the only thing. And when we're talking about pictures, I went ahead and brought one. This is 4 generations of my family. And the thing about pictures is to do an ancestor altar, you want to get it off your phone. Okay, you want to actually get, pictures of loved ones off your phone and into a frame, school-wise, so that it's more physically tangible, it's not digital, and you can actually look at it. And it's a symbol. It's a symbol of them and their lives, right? So, the first thing would be pictures. And I'm gonna show you again some photographs of some altars, and you'll see a lot of pictures. But again, that is not critical. You can do all the things that we just mentioned, the big 4 candles. Your entire ancestor altar can be 1 candle. Okay. It can be a blessed and fixed candle from a witch hoodoo shop. It can be a candle that you have dressed yourself. It can be a candle that you've just put your intention and heart into. Okay, so that's basically it. Flowers. You can go out to your garden, you can stop at Fred Meyer. You can offer flowers, put them in a bowl, put them in a vase. It's your intention, right? Nobody knows but you. And maybe it's a candle and some flowers. That's a perfectly good ancestor altar. Then you add a little bit more. You could do candle and flowers and then a little bit of food. But if you are honoring a loved one that you know, it may be a food of theirs that you know they liked. Or it could be a food that you like that you just want to offer. You know, a little, you know, literally a cookie. You know, it could be a cookie, it could be anything sweet, and you know, maybe it's a sweet, maybe it's a peppermint or something that a grandpa liked or something like that. Or a drink. Many a shot of whiskey sits upon an ancestor altar. Probably the most common drink sitting there on an ancestor altar. So it can be, you know, if you use those 4 things, you have created an ancestor altar. Any one of them will do, 4 of them would be super cool. Then yes, you can add pictures. You can add jewelry. I wore on purpose these 2 rings. This is one grandmother's ring, and this is the other grandmother's ring. Both of these rings are probably 100 years old or more. And if you have the option to wear their jewelry during this time of the year when you're wanting to do honoring, that is also an amazing, beautiful thing to do. Or don't even wear it, but just maybe you have a pocket watch, maybe you have a bracelet. You just set that down on the altar and just acknowledge. You know, maybe grandpa really liked golf. You know, you put a golf ball there. So anything that is reminiscent of them to you can go on the altar. It's not a specific list, but this gives you some ideas of what you can place on the altar and how you can create it. You can make it super fancy with a cloth and all of that, or you can, you know, put it by your bedside table. But if you do that, you need to be having a conversation about your folk coming into your dreams. So we'll talk about coming back to giving those who are not living boundaries. So we're gonna keep talking about other celebrations. So creating an altar is something you can do. Another thing that I really like is writing a letter. Writing a letter to them. One of the things for me recently that's really been up around this topic is being a grandmother. You know, I've moved up here to Portland to be with my grandchildren, and I am really well aware, like I am baking with my grandchild the same recipes that I baked with my grandmother. So there's this legacy that's happening that I really feel. Like I was my grandmother's age when I started baking with my grandmother, and here I am, a grandmother, doing the same thing. Cool, you know, so there's a sense of lineage and legacy. So so I'm thinking about my grandmother more often, but I'm thinking of her not as my grandmother. I'm thinking about her now as a person. Like it was like, oh wow. Instead of her role, I'm thinking about Kathleen, this grandmother right here, and it's like, what was like the perspective has shifted, right? Because now I'm a person being a grandmother, and I want to ask questions not of the grandmother, but of the person she was behind the grandmother, right? And so one of the things I'm considering doing this Samhain is to write her a letter and ask her some of those questions. It's like, I could say that I wish I had asked her then, but that's just not how it works. Sometimes, you know, we are so involved in our own lives and our own place in the timeline that we don't really consider sometimes our parents or our grandparents, what their life was like outside of the roles they were in ours, right? Does that make sense? So write them a letter. Certainly if you are in deep grief for somebody you care very, and I'm talking family now, but this absolutely means friends too. Absolutely. Anybody who is a heart person, friends, mentors, anybody like that, you're doing the same thing, right? And you don't have to do one altar for each person. You're doing all your people you're loving and missing in one altar. It's not going to bother them. So yes, you can write some letters to, if you're in deep grief about somebody, you can write about how much you miss them and, share your life since they've passed. Like they know that, but you can express that in however you need to in that letter. So writing a letter is always really, really great, whether it's I wish I'd known you better, or oh my God, I miss you so much better. And that can be very powerful. Because then the ritual would be to burn it, okay? To burn that on Samhain and release that to their spirit, and then to release your attachments, release some of your grief, release some of your, I know people who have done angry letters, it's like, I'm still having a hard time, forgiving you for this or that or the other. And that's fine too. You can absolutely release anger or shame or grief or any of those kinds of things in a letter through fire on Samhain. It is a release holiday. It's one of the endings and beginnings. So if you have something you need to end, you can do that way too. Okay. I mentioned baking. You can cook their favorite foods, on Samhain and celebrate them. If there was a family recipe or a family treat, even if it's like caramel popcorn, like Dad always loved caramel popcorn. I never hardly eat it, but tonight I will have a bowl of caramel popcorn in his honor. You can certainly cook or eat food. Certainly drink on their behalf, and I don't just mean alcohol, but, maybe it's a hot chocolate, maybe it's, hot tea or something like that. And then, anything, you can wear their clothes or wear, something, maybe you have a big sweatshirt of theirs, maybe you have a flannel or whatever, wearing their clothes that day can be an ongoing kind of ritual as well. So does that give you a few ideas? It does not have to be big and fancy by any means. I'm kind of a kitchen witch, so to speak. And that means you live a magical life. It doesn't always have to be high and ceremonial. It can be, and sometimes absolutely it should be, but there's a magical living aspect of it where you're just doing small, intentional magic. And that's kind of the stuff we're talking about here. Okay, what questions do you have about any of that? Yes, Steve?
When you were talking before about writing the letters to ancestors, it just made me think about that. It seems to drive home the point that if you have living ancestors, your grandparents, to sit down and ask them a lot of the questions while they're alive. My grandfather died and we went through his stuff and we found out he had a previous marriage and a previous child. My dad has a sister somewhere, we were just like, what the heck, we'd love to sit him down, and talk to him about this, but he's gone now. And, there were so many things that we found from his past that some of it we knew a little bit about, some of it we didn't know about at all. And it just kind of really made us regret afterward not really sitting down with him more while he was alive. So.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up. that is so powerful and right. Give people, the Black community says, give people their flowers now. And I love that ideology, let people know you care about them now, say, I love you now, tell people how awesome they are now, honor them now, as well as after. Oh, talk about a fantastic tradition. Much of what I learned about this, I learned in New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans for 2 years. And it absolutely changed my life around my perception of life and death, of living and dying. Because in New Orleans, in the very essence of that city, is an understanding that life and death are not enemies. They are lovers. They love each other and they dance together, because at any moment, especially in New Orleans, things are in the midst of living and dying together all the time. Everything in that city is in decay, and everything in that city is full of life. They live simultaneously and they die simultaneously, and it's such a trip. The way that it's just embraced, and the culture of death is embraced. And certainly the Black community in New Orleans has some amazing death traditions. For example, they have a second line. You may have heard of the second line. And the second line has morphed into, like, you have a second line for weddings, but it was originally, my understanding, again, I don't want to, speak incorrectly, but my understanding is that it was a funerary tradition. And that is when the entire community, whether it's the church community or the neighborhood community or the social club community, comes out into the streets and marches with band and costuming and so much music and singing and crying through the streets of New Orleans with the coffin. And they dance the coffin, meaning what we would call pallbearers, dance the coffin down the street from either the house to the church or the church to the cemetery. And sometimes you dance on the coffin. Okay, and that is not disrespectful. It is not sacrilegious. It is an honoring of that person. It is a celebration of that person's life. It is one of the most beautiful, joyful things I've ever seen as part of a funerary death tradition. So by all means, if you have never seen a funeral second line, look it up on the internet, and it is a stunning display of love, really, for the community and for the people who have passed. So I'm really glad that helped remind me that yes, if you have, even your folks, maybe they're not that old, maybe they're super healthy, but life is a strange and chaotic thing, and more so all the time. Ask the questions now. There are actually, and you may know this, there's a whole kind of industry about this very thing. There are books and there's apps and there's programs. There's several ways that you can record the life stories of your people. Like my kids gave me a book after their father passed away that says what we want to know about mom. And it's literally like you just start telling them stories in the book, but it's written in your handwriting, so they have your handwriting then. And so it's your stories, and that way they have some of them. And then it may spur conversations or questions and things like that. I know that there's a program because I've seen it pass on the socials where it's vocal, maybe for more elderly relatives who aren't wanting to write all of that. And like you video them talking about it or they audio it, either way. So there's actual ways that you can do that in a kind of official, organized capacity, which is really great. You might want to look into that. A great Christmas gift and kind of meaningful to receive as well, because we're going to talk about this a little bit, and that is the acknowledgement that your people will pass and that you want their stories. You know, instead of that being a sad or scary or avoided, denied conversation, it's like when the day happens, because it's not an if, it's a when. I love you and I want this. I want your stories. You know, that's an honoring thing and a great gift for any holidays that may be coming up. So thanks for bringing that up, Steve. That's great. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing and then we'll take a little break here. What we are going to be doing here in a bit is we're actually going to be creating a spell candle. And that is something that you can do for a Samhain ritual to both honor and release, you know, energies and intentions with the help of your ancestors, or if you're needing to release something around that ancestor. So what I want to do right now is I want to pass around this, since we're a small group. Oh, while I have this up, and while I'm not forgetting, on Spotify, there's a really, really, really great Samhain playlist. It has some of the best Samhain music. It's called Samhain, and the owner of it is called Cat Steele, Steele. So it has a lot of holiday music, if you will, for this time of year. So Samhain, Cat Steele, has a little pumpkin.
And a cat with a K or a C?
With a cat, with K, cat with K. If you just put that in a Spotify search, it'll probably come up because it has like 10,000 saves. It's really, really good. So I wanted to share that with you. And then I want to share this with you. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. This has 10 pictures of it. I am just going to let you guys, I'm going to pass the phone around and let you scroll through it individually, since we're a small group. And what we have, the first 1, 2, 3 pictures are the fire festival. Okay. Then we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The next 8 pictures are altars. Different altars you have. Okay. So I will go ahead and pass this way and just let you guys have an idea visually. Yeah, or you guys can share that together. That's a great idea. Thank you. Just some visuals of how people cut down it. And then I'll have my phone here if we take a break if you want to really look at the picture more. You're going to take a picture of the picture. We can do that. And while that's happening, I got our candles at a little witch shop over in Beaverton. If the room fits. Are you familiar with them, Steve? No. There we go. I'll come back. And they have over there things that you might need: candles, herbs, oils, and they are doing, I think, a Samhain ritual, or they have a Samhain spell, and I'm going to pass that around for you. That I thought was very clever. Here it is.
That's something you can share with the people online or?
Yes, I got these ingredients, at If the Broom Fits in Beaverton. And there is a connecting with our ancestors spell that I can't read with these glasses, but I will give you.
I was gonna say, I've got the. Boy, hey, that's,
Yeah, you see my point.
yeah.
So here are cards. If you are interested in that, I'll put that there. And then if you guys want to maybe take a picture of this, that way you can make it bigger. I'll just put these over here as well. For later, and then let me pass this to you. Oh, so these last two pictures were at their shop. This one and this one. So these first two pictures are at their shop, and I'll let you guys can maybe kind of. Oh, you did? Okay. I was distracted doing something else. Okay, you got it, you got it. So that gives you some ideas of different kinds of altars, and certainly that fire fence will be. So we're gonna take a quick break, maybe, 5 minutes, bathroom is here. Get some water if you need to. And then we're gonna talk about those big questions about ancestor and lineage and what do we do with that? And then how to become the ancestors. Okay, so we'll take a couple minutes and let me know if you have questions. You can come look at this stuff if you like. Sorry, where's the stuff?
I've got a picture of
Yeah, okay, great. Great.
Hey, Steve. Oh, and
Go ahead.
All right. Yes, divination is one of the ritual celebration traditions you can do at Samhain time. Obviously, tarot, oracle cards, since it is considered the witch's new year, the Celtic New Year, sometimes people do their big year-long spreads. Kind of what are the energies that will be coming into this new year. They'll do not just 2 or 3 card pulls, they'll do the big, sometimes double card spreads on this night as part of their ritual practice. Of course, there's lots of different kinds of divination, runes, scrying. Scrying is a big divination practice at Samhain. If you're familiar with that, it's looking at either in a mirror, a dark mirrored surface, water, a dark water bowl, where there's no light, going into a meditative state and seeing what images that will come through that venue. Scrying is a big practice. So any of those kind of major divination practices can be kind of part of the Samhain celebration practice ritual as well. So, okay, anybody have any questions or need any more time with their card? You good? All right. So the big question. What about those ancestors? Okay. Well, there's 2 big questions that pop up when we really talk about this. And that is, what if there was, breakage within the person and the family? Right? What if these were not healthy ancestors, relationally or otherwise? Well, the wisdom that was passed down to me is thus, and that is, once we pass over those human failings and dissolve, that doesn't mean that you have to forgive or forget or work with those particular ancestors. While they may be continuing their healing journey, any damage that you were left with might still be activated, right? You do not have to work with them. The term that I really, really, really like is called the well and wise ancestors. I learned that in Ireland, that who you are calling upon are your well and wise ancestors. And that kind of, to me, passes it out of your individual calculations, of who is deserving of being in your energetic space, but that you are calling upon your well and wise ancestors. There's other terminologies for that, but I think that really encapsulates it really, really well. So when you start like an ancestor practice, sometimes you don't know all the folk that you might benefit from knowing, right? In this level, in this kind of relationship. So it's about establishing relationship, even with folk you may not know. Okay, so I want to talk about lineage. I believe that there are at least 3 different kinds of lineage, and potentially many more. There's your actual blood DNA, obvious lineage, right? The physical DNA that came into and created your body, right? So there's that lineage, the blood lineage. I personally was adopted. So in this picture, this is not my biological mother, but it's the mom. And in this picture, my mom was adopted as well. So this isn't her biological mom, but this is my mom and my grandma, right? Now, I gave birth to my daughter, but that doesn't make any of this more or less, right? So I have my heart lineage is kind of how I title it. You have your blood lineage, you have your heart lineage. If you come from an adopted situation, if you come from a foster situation, if you are not necessarily being raised by your blood DNA folk, okay? But there are also, when I talk about heart lineage, that's your chosen family too, right? You may have an auntie, or you might have a neighbor, or you might have a teacher or a mentor, somebody who showed up and was more parental or grandparental to you than any of your bio folk.
Along those lines, we also have animal families. That's one of the members of our community.
That is so accurate. Yes, you have your animal allies, and all of this can be done for your beloved pets as well. Absolutely, you can have pet altars be, and once they pass, they can work with you again in the spirit realm as well. That is such an excellent point. You have your animal familiar lineage as well. So your heart lineage is, you know, people that you have chosen, who have loved you, who chose you, and you have chosen them, biology aside, right? And then I also think there's a spiritual lineage, meaning like I have teachers that informed and shaped my life deeply, right? And so I consider them ancestors. You know, their teachings, their who they are and what they created and what they brought forth has been passed down the line, you know, certainly in some, you know, magical and witchcraft traditions, you have lineages of that tradition or that craft. That may or may not be your spirit lineage. So, you know, that's something for you to consider. Who are my teachers? Who are the mentors and the influencers and the people who've impacted me? And how are they how can I honor their contribution into creating the awesome person you are? So there's lots of different kinds of ways you can work with lineage, and all of those are ancestors, right? All of those are ancestors, people that have crossed the veil and are in any of those categories are people that you can work with. Does that make sense? Okay. So, yeah, so you may be adopted and know nothing about your biological heritage. And when you're working with generational work, ancestor veneration, ancestral spirit work, there's so many ways to do it. You know, you can't really do it wrong. Let's talk about some of the things that you you need to do to establish a good ancestor practice. One is those boundaries, right? So you are responsible for setting up your safe space. Okay? You're responsible for setting up your parameters around how they can interact with you. So you're very clear, and you know, this happens during meditation / prayer, right? You can use extra tools if you would like, you know, to kind of give those intentions some oomph, but really it's all about your will. It's about your intent. And so you're like, okay, I'm meditating about this. I want to start some ancestor work, but here's how it's going to work. Okay, here's how it's going to work. You know, maybe it's like, don't be chatting me up in my dreams too much, you know, and what does too much mean to you? You know, give them some parameters. If you're going to give me messages, I need it in this way, or not while I'm driving, or not when I'm at work. You know, can we negotiate these boundaries? So, I mean, that's a good place to start, so that you know how you're willing to receive information or support from them. Does that make sense? Okay. So establishing how is this going to look? Don't go willy-nilly, no boundaries, no intentions, no thought into ancestor work. Okay. Don't do that. Because I'm making some assumptions, and those assumptions are that there is a active spiritual life post to death. Okay, I've obviously spoken into that, in the last hour. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what that looks like. We may have some ideas of what it looks like. Some people may have interactions with psychic mediums and have some sort of feedback that way, which is, when you find the right one and you have an ancestor willing to talk to you through that telephone line, that's very powerful stuff. But you may have an ancestor who is struggling in their transition to the other life. And you can choose just not to work with it. And in those, if that is a belief system that you have, that there are souls that struggle in their transition, my point of view and perspective is that all you can do is send them love, right? All you can do is send them love, even if they caused you harm. Love and forgiveness are really two different things. You're like, don't forgive that behavior. But the loving energy that I am is releasing you. May you go to the light, right? Go to the light, find your peace, find your way through, right? I really hope you find your peace and some healing on the other side. Now, do it over there. Okay, so that would be my suggestion. If you have an energy or an ancestor that is in that struggle. So that is a way to handle that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So well and wise ancestors, boundaries, find out, like if you want to work with an ancestor specifically, okay, then you really kind of focus your individual intention and practice, right? It's like, I really miss my grandfather, or, I need support from my mom or whatever. You can focus that and say, okay, right now, I'm really going to try and be in communication relationship with those persons. So you can also kind of focus it that way. It's not just a wide net. It can be a wide net, but it can also be specific. So you're getting the idea that there's just lots of ways to do this. I would say you can't do it wrong, except for the boundary piece. Okay, that is the only piece that I would say. Don't open that door without some protections in place. Okay.
When you say casting a wide net, how would you approach that?
Well, in meditation, and you can call in this scene, the known and unknown. Okay, so we can kind of that's another phrase I really like. With well and wise, known and unknown. My ancestors, my loved ones, known and unknown. And you can say, I welcome your intercession, your support, your love, your whatever workings you have the ability to work over there, because who knows, I welcome our relationship, our continued relationship to all my well and wise ancestors, known and unknown. It's kind of like a nice magic spell phrase right there. So does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Because I'm going to run you through a short little meditation that will give you an idea of what you can do on your own to connect with some of these folks. Okay. So are you guys willing to do a little meditation? Does everybody feel comfortable with that? Okay. All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll invite you guys to go ahead and put, stuff down off your lap. And get as comfortable as you can. And go ahead and shut down your eyes, knowing that you will hear all sorts of things. But we are going to allow our inner life to kind of come online and let this external life kind of fade to the background. So I invite you to have your feet on the floor as best you can, or your tailbone in, and open your feet, open the bottoms of your feet, kind of let that chakra there in the center of your feet kind of open so that you can be grounded, let your energy kind of seep down towards the earth so that you feel held and safe and connected and rooted to the earth. I invite you to take a deep breath in, let it out with a sigh, and take another deep breath in and hold it at the top and release. And combining those, take a deep breath in, hold it at the top, and release with a sigh. And continue to breathe deeply. And I'm going to invite you to bring your consciousness, your attention, your focus into your imaginative space. And I'm going to invite you to imagine yourself sitting as visual as you can. Some people are visual, some people are not, but follow along as best you can. It's what you feel more than what you can see. But I want you to imagine, I invite you to imagine that you are in a forest, maybe one of the ones that surrounds us. You've gone for a hike and you're just off the trail, or maybe you're in Scotland or Ireland or some other forested, beautiful environment that you can know or imagine. A little green all around you. And I invite you to use your 5 senses to really ground there. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you touch? Are you sitting on the ground? Are you sitting on a blanket? Are you sitting on a stone? Do you hear a stream close by? Do you hear birds? Is there wind in the trees? Is there sun on your face? And very slowly, quietly, you hear footsteps. And you're not afraid. You know that your job right now is to only be an observer. You are here only to consider, only to observe. Because out of the forest comes your mother. Maybe she's living, maybe she's passed, but you're simply observing. There's no emotional attachment, there's no need, there's really no emotion involved. You're witnessing. You're witnessing her passing from one edge of the grove to another. And behind her is your biological father. And you just witness this human walking from one side of the grove to another. And behind him, perhaps another male parental figure, maybe another father, a father figure, an uncle, a brother. And you're not attached to them. There's no emotion here. You're observing, you're considering the human that walks past. And behind him is a female figure, maybe another mother, an aunt, a sister, a mentor, a teacher, somebody who nurtured and mothered you. And you watch them simply walk past, considering, observing, witnessing. And then, known or unknown, comes your biological grandmother, who carried you as an egg within your mother. You lived inside your grandmother's body as an egg in the fetus that was your biological mother. And you witness her, and she passes from the grove, followed by your biological grandfather, known or unknown. And it doesn't matter in this exercise if they are well or wise, because you're just observing. They have no power. You're just considering. You're just witnessing. And behind them, perhaps another grandparental figure, male or female, maybe a mentor, maybe from your spirit family, maybe from your heart family. These are humans who had deep challenges, hopefully some joys, definitely some traumas. You're just witnessing a lineage. You're witnessing, you're not attaching, you're considering. And they just keep coming and passing before your eyes, known and unknown, biological, heart, spirit. The line just keeps going. It just keeps going. It just keeps going. Until finally, the mist comes into the grove and you can no longer see the continual lineage of your peoples all the way back to the beginning of time. But out of this mist comes one ancestor, one well and wise ancestor who carries a strength of character and health and wisdom. They may be known, they may be unknown, but they come to stand before you. And they have a gift. It may be a gift of words. It may be a physical gift. I will be quiet and give you a few minutes to hear or see or feel what this ancestor has for you today. And if an ancestor did not approach you, know that you can always come back to this place or another sacred space of your own design and call them forth until you have established that connection. If they did come forth, thank them, knowing that you can visit them again. And slowly they fade back into the mists. And the mists begin to clear, and the sun comes back out again, perhaps dappled through the leaves into the grove. You get up from the rock or the ground or your blanket or whatever you were seated upon, and set your foot back on the path. And with deep breaths, return to this time and this place and this now. With a deep breath again. And another one. Hold at the top and release. And the next one. Hold at the top. Release with a sigh. And return with the gong of the clock. And if you would like to take a moment to write down anything, any notes that you want to have in your journal or your phone, or if you would like some paper, even if nothing really happened, just write down what maybe sensations or thoughts, or, oh, I can return to this, or I didn't like that at all. Whatever you might want to deal with that. Just contemplate. Maybe a couple minutes. And capture our last couple thoughts. You can return to that. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? I don't want to impose upon your own journey, but if anybody'd like to share anything, even if it was like, didn't say anything. Okay. If anything comes up and you want to share it later, that is perfectly fine. But that meditation that we just did is a way to connect with individual or spreading the wide net and letting whoever comes at you come at you. Because you have set it up when you go into meditation that, you know, the only energies that are going to happen here, and that's one of the reasons we go into observing and considering that there shouldn't be a whole lot of emotional charge there, right? That this isn't about any dramas or traumas or even great love and grief that you may be feeling. It's just like the observation of the lives of the people who have brought about your life, right? Then you can take that into more emotional territory if you'd like, right? It's through that kind of meditation you can call into a sacred space people you need to have conversations with, if they're forgiveness or, for example, if you didn't get to the hospital in time, right? If you didn't get to say goodbye, that doesn't mean you can't now, right? Through a letter or through this kind of meditation, you call them into a sacred space, with the parameters that, only well and wise and healthy interactions will happen here. And say, I'm so sorry I didn't get there in time. I feel really guilty about that. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get like, I was already gone, right? Or I knew you were on your way. I didn't want you to see me that way, right? So these are places you can have those conversations. If you have a grandparent you'd like to know more about or whatever, you can ask them to come forth and show you what they can. So it's through that kind of methodology that you can explore those connections. Okay? It's a tool. Yes, Steve.
I have a share from online.
Oh, please.
It felt like it could have been an amalgamation of ancestral women going way back. Do you ever experience bits and pieces or conglomerations of ancestors?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of work right now happening about healing the matrilineal line in women's circles and goddess circles right now. And briefly, a lot of the archetypical work is coming up, meaning that you may have your crone grandmothers, an amalgamation of the wisdom of your ancestors come in as a kind of crone grandmother, right? Or an amalgamation of the wisdom of a particular heritage or lineage come through. It may not be an individual, person from that culture or bloodline, but it very well could be the representation of that bloodline kind of thing. So yes, that is definitely a way that works. I have not talked to any men who have done patrilineal lineage work, just because I'm not in those circles right now, but I'm sure it's equally as powerful and equally as available to just, look back through the male line and go, this is when we get into generational traumatic healing, which is really something that's kind of up in somatic world and therapy world, that we are finding that science is proving that DNA, our cells, can be impacted by the traumas our blood ancestors experience, right? So there's a spiritual, if you will, spiritual therapeutic practice now of going back that, when we heal behind us and forward. We heal our ancestors, we heal our descendants. So I like that as a concept a lot, and that we're breaking generational traumas by choosing different behaviors, whether it's addiction, whether it's abuse, whether it's violence. It doesn't always have to be that dramatic either. Sometimes it's keeping secrets in a family. Well, you know what? We're going to be more honest in my family. We're going to be more transparent and trust relationships rather than trying to protect everybody's feelings. It can be just kind of that simple of a shift, right? It doesn't have to be huge traumas. So if you're interested, there's a lot of healing generational trauma out there. And I think, the archetypes and the amalgamations really kind of play into that. And I know people who have done like generational trauma work by using those archetypes and kind of metaphors, the metaphors of your ancestors to heal, those. So in women's circles, a lot of, women in the past weren't able to have their voice, right? They weren't able to speak their desires, their needs, their, so on and so forth, for an example, right? That happens in everybody's lineage. That's just been a cultural thing. And so in meditation, as part of these meditations, this is an example, is they invited forth anybody who needed to express, anybody in their lineage who needed to express, that they were going to hold space for them, right? That they were calling in the guardians, guides, and gods, angels, allies, and ancestors, and they were going to hold space for all these women to release their grief or their tears or to speak their truth. So it was, that's happening in women's circles, and they're taking some of those strategies into meditative space to do it with, real and metaphoric women in their lineage. Does that make sense? I mean, sometimes it can get a little super woo, but is this making some sense? Okay. So there's a lot, and it's a relatively, while it is very, very old, obviously, very, very old, there now is a new kind of overlay of how can we use this work? How can we use this for our own health? But also, this is really work for descendants. And the other thing, we talk about ancestors, and we kind of talk about archetypes. In women's circles, you've got maiden, mother, queen, and crone. And in men's circles, there's different names for it. It can be, lover, husband, king, and sage, that kind of thing. And that within each one of those are those things. Like, for example, if you are in a mothering era, say, late 20s to 40s, right? In that era. And I say mothering phase or fathering phase, because this isn't about being a biological mother or being a biological father and giving birth. It's about, that's a time of life where traditionally people are nurturing and growing either themselves, their careers, or others, right? It's a mothering, growing, fathering, growing. You're protecting, you're learning, all of those kinds of things. So the same thing can be used in ancestor work. So whether you have actual birth descendants, right? If you have beings born from your body, or fathered by you, that's not just legacy. That's not just descendancy, right? It's what have you impacted? How have you taught? How have you mentored? How have you mothered and fathered? How, all of those things. So when when we're talking lineage, we've been talking a great deal about ancestors, but now we're going to move into becoming a good ancestor, and using some of these techniques and strategies and all of this to leave a legacy, right? So whether it is a literal biological one, or it's your work in the world, or it's just how you've made your friends feel loved, or whatever you do, the thing I want you to start thinking about is and not as pressure, but as a gift. What is my legacy? What do I want to leave? And it does not have to be a big deal, right? Just love is a big freaking deal, right? Who do you love? And how do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered as a kind and loving person? What are you doing right now to become a good ancestor, to leave a good legacy, to leave good memories behind? So these are some things I want you to start contemplating, not as more pressure, but as an opportunity to create and to move into. Does that make sense? Okay. So be thinking about that. And again, this is a bridge. This is bridge work. So what made the people who passed good ancestors? What about them did you respect and admire and value and love? And how do you reflect that, right? What qualities of them are within you? So again, things to consider in this much larger work. And again, we're tip of the iceberg here and concepts. So I want to leave you with a couple thoughts about becoming a good ancestor, and then we'll do a little candle spell for you to take home. Consider your own death. And I don't mean to be super dramatic about that, but anytime, right? Anybody can go anytime. We just know that. That's the way the world is right now. So if it was your time tomorrow, if it was your time later tonight, how does that feel? Right? Are you mostly good with the life that you've left behind? And are you mostly good with, and I'm not talking about faith, and I'm not talking about how you perceive the other world, or if there is even another world. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how's your business? How's your business? I want you to consider the person who has to walk in and clean up when you have left the building, right? And I mean that in a bigger sense. Like somebody, whether you are partnered, whether you have parents, whether you have children, who is the person who's going to walk into your apartment or your house and go, like 6 hours after you're dead or less, go, oh God, okay, what do I do with this?
Probably the police in my face.
well, the whole point is, who is that? And if there isn't somebody, there needs to be somebody. You know, how do you find that somebody? And then what are you leaving with? You know, for example, when my parents died, it was a mess, right? I didn't know where anything was, so on and so forth, you know. So for many people report that the year of paperwork that it takes post a loved one's death is more traumatic than the death of the loved ones. So I decided right off the bat that I did not want to do that to my children. And so I got my shit in order, right? Get your stuff in order. And guys, let me tell you the number one thing that's the most important thing for somebody to know. Somebody has to know the code to your phone. And that is the simplest thing and the most traumatic thing ever, because you know what? With secondhand authentication nowadays, nobody can get into anything of yours. You could have left your people $1 bazillion and you've got all your stuff laid out and you've done all your work. And if they can't get into your phone, and believe me, Verizon cannot do it for you. If you cannot get into that phone, you may never get that money. You may never get the information that you need to do the things that you need to do to wrap up business. Make sure somebody knows the code to your phone. Secondhand authentication, banks, emails, everything you do nowadays. Okay? Make sure somebody knows your code. Put it somewhere.
I read an article about creating a death finder with all your passwords in it and all your important paperwork, all your documents are not easy to find.
That is the best thing you can do for the people that you love, is take responsibility for your own death and make it as easy as possible. There are so many actually really funny and beautiful I'm dead now books. And I mean, they're just humorous. It's like, okay, passwords, insurance, car title, you know, you just don't even think about the things that are going to be left behind. Who gets your pets? You know, I mean, we have to not be afraid of our own deaths. And that's part of being a good ancestor. Is like, okay, who's got medical power of attorney for you? You know, these are conversations that we should be having without freaking out about them at our, you know, amongst our friends and family, right? If it's your family, great. If it's your friends, great. These need to be conversations. They don't have to be morbid. They don't have to be like, oh, no, that's never going to happen. It's like, yeah, it actually is. You know, I will actually die at some point. So I really encourage you to think about this in a way that's, again, not necessarily dramatic or traumatic, but practical and responsible and realistic, right? Who who's going to get rid of the things you don't want your parents to see? No joke. No joke. Are there journals that you maybe need to burn now? I'm not kidding. Are there things in the bedside table that your best friend needs to get rid of before your parents go through your shit? You know, no joke, right? We have these insulated private lives, and suddenly when you're dead, they're not, right? So I say this from quite a bit of experience with people leaving, and I've got a friend who's a death doula, and there's stories. So that is
Gotta sit your mom down and have a talk about those anal beads.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. There are stories. So I'm just encouraging you as part of this practice to celebrate yourself too, right? To celebrate your own life and let people know how you want to be celebrated after you die. Make sure. Do people know you want to be cremated if that's what you want? Do people know you want to party if that's what you want? So as a part of this whole thing, you see how it goes hand in hand. It's a bridge. It's really a bridge and a spiral, right? What happens then happens now, time, and all that time stuff, right? Everything's happening all at the same time, right? So if we heal now, we heal above and below, back and forth. Okay, any questions about that before we quickly do our candles? Good? Okay. All right. So I am going to let you guys each take a black candle. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to let you take a nail because you are going to draw on the candle with a nail. There you go. And this. All right, and then I'm going to let you choose a color. Okay. And then I'm going to let you choose a key. Keys are a traditional symbol for this time of the year because it's kind of the locking and unlocking of the portals between life and death, the portals between old and new. So once you grab a key, a crossroads, if you will. All right, and you will take some of the red string and get about that much, 9 inches-ish of thread. And just maybe bite it with your teeth, unless you have scissors handy. Perfect. Scissors. I'll just let you pass it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be precise. And then I am putting in some yarrow, which is good for clarity and wisdom and courage and commitment. And some angelica, which again is kind of protective, positive energy. Some blessed thistle, which is a cleansing herb, cleansing and protection. And some rosemary for remembrance. A little Shakespeare for you. Rosemary for remembrance, purification, and protection. Go ahead and string your key onto the red thread. And Steve, do you have any like maybe paper? Because we're going to put a little bit of oil and I like them to roll. And I didn't think about what they're going to roll on.
Plain paper.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you'll still need something to cover, but the paper should work fine. All right. Some blessing oil from the House of Hoodoo in New Orleans. Absolutely the best place to get some of your, yeah, I actually one for each.
Oh, one
Yeah,
piece of
yeah.
paper.
Can you give this back?
Yes, yes. Do you want me to take cards while we're at it? Okay, so yes, House of Hoodoo does great stuff. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to come down to the floor if you would like. So this is blessing oil, and you're going to get just a little bit on your fingers, and you're going to rub it on your candle. Okay, just a little bit. I'm going to sprinkle. There we go. This works. And you are going to roll your oil candle. Oh, I'm sorry. You need to scratch into it before you oil it. Oh, but you're fine. Sometimes you can do sigils on this, but you can put a word. Okay, a word of something that you would like to release at Samhain. Something that you would like to release. Okay. So, and it can be, you can actually, you don't have to write the whole world word. You can write a symbol for it. So you'll have your word.
Release you by letting go.
Letting go. What do you want to let go of? What no longer serves you? So write that, boil it, roll it, and then you put your red string with the key around it. So you've written your word, you boiled it, you roll it in the herbs. You won't get all the herbs to stick to it. Just get
I'm sorry, what was the name of that one?
blessings.
And it's coming your way.
Oh, actually, I already got it.
Yeah, they got it.
Sure smells good.
I love it. It's their secret recipe. But it's made by a mambo, which is the high priestess of the Hoodoo days. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And they have tremendous fixed candles that have been blessed. They ship out of New Orleans. So. Okay, and then when you've done that, tie your red ribbon around in whatever way you want to with your key. And then actually, what I think you guys can do is keep this paper and maybe roll your candle up in the paper with the herbs Yeah, to take it home. Yeah. Yeah, that should work. And then put it on your altar and burn it on Samhain with your intentions. Maybe a little hard to do with your oily fingers.
Who cares when that smells good?
Yeah.
Yeah, it smells lovely.
Just want to put some in your bath.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how weird it would be if I just start rubbing it on my clothes and it smell like it.
Perfect time. Yeah, and then you just roll up and maybe fold your edges of your paper. And I'll take these back. And the nails. Go. There you go. All right. Well, does anybody have any questions at all before we wrap up?
Are you gonna be offering more classes?
Yes. Yes, I think we talked December.
I don't think we have a date set,
We
but
do not have a date set.
we will be discussing that.
Yes, yes. And you may follow me. I do teach online courses as well. I am at see if I bring any of the cards. I don't know. Cozy Crone Cottage. Robin Murphy at Cozy Crone Cottage. Thanks. I'll be doing a Foundations of Practical Magic course starting in March. So you can follow me at Cozy Crone Cottage, COZYCRONE And if you forget, you can call the shop and Steve will get us in touch.
Yeah.
No, it's just on Instagram.
Oh,
At Cozy Crone Cottage. I haven't moved into the website world yet. Not yet. So, all right, thank you so much for coming. It was really, really nice to meet
Thank
you
you,
all.
Robin.
And I really, really appreciate you guys coming. So thank you. Yeah, you bet. Oh, absolutely.